Greetings, YouTube. I know you clicked on this video and it says Kabam Broccoli and you're just seeing me and you're like, what is this clickbait BS? But to protect his identity and full privacy, we're basically doing like a radio interview where I'm asking him questions and then he is appearing. He actually is appearing to me as his Twitter handle, Noodleman. So kind of a cool thing to begin with. I've got some questions to ask him, and then I have a lot of your questions that I have no idea how long this is going to be. He's been incredibly generous to give us his time, and I have produced over 7,000 videos on my YouTube channel, and yet I have never been as excited and honored to produce anything on this channel as this interview. So we're going to start off by giving this man his flowers, as the kids say, because this may come as a surprise to you, bud, but so many people are depressed that you have left Kabam. How does it feel to know that all these people have reached out to give you praise?
First of all, thank you, Prof, for having me on. Appreciate it. I always love to interface with the community and the content creators. Long-time fan, long-time watcher of the channel. So my feelings on how many people reached out, honestly, it was a mixed bag of emotions when I left Kabam. And it still is, and the player base hasn't helped with that. I love every single one of you guys, but that response was way beyond what I was expecting, and I was truly touched. I'm extra sad now. I'm extra frustrated. I'm extra angry at myself for leaving, but also it's kind of the next step I needed to take. And I'm feeling very supported by the community, and I love to see when our community comes together like this, and I'm truly touched by it.
Well, amen.
Yeah.
You are literally called the greatest of all time, the GOAT, and people have referred to you that. I refer to that. We'll get into so many reasons why during this interview. But the first thing I've got to ask, because when your parents want you to save room for dessert or to earn the dessert, they make you eat broccoli, right? They make you eat the vegetables. And so that's normally a thing that people talk about as like the elephant in the room to get to the dessert. So why on earth would you call yourself Kabam Broccoli? What's the origin of that, and why has that stuck?
That's a great question. So my name Kabam Broccoli was kind of my Kabam name. My name, most people call me by, will be Noodle. However, when I was looking into making a Kabam alias, because I made a Kabam version of my name, I was thinking about making a Kabam Noodle, but I thought that's so generic. I see so many noodles around. So many people are called Noodle. Like when I'm gaming online, there's so many people called Noodle. That's too generic. What's a healthier alternative? And I Googled healthier alternatives to noodles, and the first top Google result was broccoli. I was like, this is kind of lame, but we're going to make it happen. And I've been using broccoli kind of ever since as a healthier alternative, even on my online aliases. So, yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, and the irony is that when you the designers and programmers, which I can't wait to get into the process of it because so many people want to know but don't know what it takes to create a champion. But when a champion is underwhelming, when they, instead of giving us those beautiful big yellow numbers, give us 3-star numbers as 6-star champs, they're automatically referred to as wet noodles.
Yes. So it's man, that hurts me so much. Like when people started calling Ebony Maw.
I called him
noodle,
Ebony.
I was like, oh.
I called him Ebony Coleslaw because I don't like coleslaw. I don't like the side of it. People will hype it up with the chicken, and I'll be like, give me the chicken, leave the coleslaw in the trash.
So actually, I stole that. This is a pro tip that actually I don't think many people know. But at the end of our champion cycles, we'll do a post-mortem. We break down the character, kind of what went wrong, what went right, how we can learn from that type of thing. And that name, Ebony Coleslaw, really stuck for the guy. So when I was doing my post-mortem, I like to do these funny presentations where I'll grab like images and pictures and make it kind of fun. We called him Ebony Coleslaw in the post-mortem. In an official Kabam documentation, he is called Ebony Coleslaw. Still one from your channel.
I have made it, y'all. My life has peaked. You have seen... future kids' wives, second and third at best.
I mean, you got to embrace it, man. You got to embrace it. He's Ebony Coleslaw. It's not what we wanted him to be, but that's what he became. So, got to live with it.
Exactly. So, speaking of which, I have from the community post a bunch of questions pulled up, and instead of asking you about them, and we're gonna close the door 1 second on this.
we're closing the door. Things are getting real now. Ooh, here we go.
All right, and we're back. Sorry about that, YouTube, but basically, I have said do not disturb on my door for this interview. So when there was a little bit knock at my door, ignoring it. Sorry, Girl Scout cookies, not today. It's not Girl Scout season. I don't know why I said that. But the two most popular questions that were submitted, and I guess we'll just start from there. Cole Downey said, are there any characters that you feel in the community are underappreciated and think we need to do more than we realize with them?
Ooh. So the first thing I want to say on a question like that is you guys probably know the game better than I do.
Thank you for admitting that.
You guys, I learn a lot from watching content creators, from seeing what players do. So a lot of my information will be secondhand. That said, I do have some tips on things I think are underused. My personal favorite kind of underused champion that I designed is Sasquatch. He's just capable of a lot of different things, and he's very unique. Obviously, I'm familiar most with my champions. But if I was going to give people tips on underused characters, I would think of it less as underused characters and more as underused mechanics. And one of the things I think players could really improve on and just take their gameplay to the next level is learning about the spacing of animations. And what I mean by that is you can do so many cool things, such as like a heavy punish with your heavy, if you just like throw a light attack after an animation to get a little closer. Small little tidbits like that, I think, and mastering just where you are in the arena, you can take any character to the next level. It's something you'll see a little bit with Hercules, where like after someone throws a heavy attack, maybe you throw one light and then you charge your heavy and then you'll intercept with it. But mastering the animations of a character can take almost any character in the roster to the absolute next level, and it's very much by experimentation and just trying what they have to offer.
Wow.
Yeah.
So in that spirit, in the spirit of that, if people say that a champion's trash, you're thinking, well, if you try these certain utility outcomes with the champion, you'll find that they're actually more useful than you think.
Absolutely. And Mr. Negative, I think, is another great example of that, where on his own, he's not insane, but if you can get really good at these inputs and lining things up, you can take that character to just beyond God tier. Same kind of thing with Tigra. These characters do have a lot of mastery, but I think they're underrated in that they are more accessible than the community might think they are.
Perfect. So building off of that, Hassan Ali has another popular question, and it's kind of like a three-part question. We'll start with part one. Who is your favorite champ in the game?
Ooh, my favorite champ in the game. Am I allowed to pick my own?
Absolutely, man. If you designed him, I mean, it's not like you can't have a favorite kid, though most people do. They just don't say it.
So, yeah, I would definitely split it in two ways. I have my favorite kids, so to speak. Obviously, I love them all. They're my children. You know, they're all important to me. But I do have my favorite children, and then also I do have my favorite characters. And my favorite characters are not actually my own. I do tend to play a lot with my own characters, and it's not that it takes away from them. You get tired of doing the same thing over and over. You want to try someone else's cool stuff. So I think my favorite character in MCOC right now is probably Elsa Bloodstone.
Whoa.
And she can do a lot of really cool stuff, which is why I like her. Also, there is a bit of an exploit that some people might know about, and it is a bug that might get patched. But if you do a well-timed block while you're getting hit in the face, you can hit evade out of that combo. So that might get patched in the future. It's a gameplay thing. But at this current moment, she's capable of doing so many really cool things if you just well-time block while you're getting struck if you happen to make a mistake. Just makes her feel super insane, and I use her as much as I can. And then my second favorite's Tigra. I absolutely love the characters in our game that you can master. When I started at Kabam, I was all about playing the game as much as I could, getting as good as I could. And those characters that allow your inputs and your actions to just take the character to the absolute next level, such as Tigra, or even Elsa Bloodstone, if you're doing the right things, are my favorite characters in the game. I loved Quake for a long time, but I decided to stop playing Quake because I felt like I was cheesing the game, and it doesn't actually take that much skill. But I also do love characters like that as well, that kind of change the rules of the game.
Awesome. First off, this video is going to be called Kabam Broccoli Tells All. And when he talks about a design flaw in a champion that's actually kind of a buff until they patch it, that's when you know you've gotten the first-hand knowledge from the man himself. So since you answered the first question, the second part is, who was your favorite champ to design?
That's Apocalypse. Hands down, Apocalypse was the most fun I've ever had on any character. And the reason why is because, one, he's a big name. I love working on the big names, Doctor Doom, Hercules, who was voted in. Any character that has got a lot of hype behind them, I love working on those. But the second thing is he's such an interesting character. Apocalypse is like this villain, but he kind of means well by some of the things he's doing, and he kind of brings people together. And having a champion that has so much lore and so much identity that you can kind of understand, and like the reasonings for being kind of a villain character is kind of understandable in some world. I find those so interesting to design. And then each of his abilities, just the way he brings mutants together with his kind of custom horseman ability and his synergies and just what his impact on the overall roster. I had such a blast putting together the whole kit. And then also I did model his 4 abilities in his base kit to be mirrored after the 4 horsemen of Apocalypse. So what I mean by that, he's got 4 debuffs. He's got the concussion, he's got the poison, he's got the weakness, and all of them correlate to the different horseman effects in his comics. So like think of it as pestilence, that's why he's got a poison. Stuff like that. And there's war, that's why he's got a degen. Each of them kind of correlate to one of the abilities, and just that level of lore and putting that into a character is so much fun. And then when we released him, seeing all the positive reactions to him just made the whole package the most memorable experience I've had at Kabam.
Did you know that you were already taking a class that was really good, like maybe the best class, and then making them, I don't want to say OP, but by far the best, knowing that you could take somebody like OG Storm, who is a solid champion by her own, but not the best, but when you make her a horsewoman, as I like to call her, suddenly she's amazing. Was that part of the goal of the Apocalypse design?
Part of the goal was definitely to make mutants matter. I definitely wanted to buff some of the guys who kind of get a little bit less love. So kind of think of like Cable and Wolverine and Storm. I love to bring characters who aren't great up. That's the same thing I did with the Red Guardian and Abomination synergy as well. Just making those characters have a lot of value, I think, was important. And Apocalypse was a great candidate for it. So yes, absolutely, that was intentional.
By the way, I have to tell you this. I know this is going to sound incredibly nerdy and like I'm fanboying out, but I don't care. When you talk about creating Apocalypse, I get chills. Like just thinking about, because you impact so many people, like so many people go for a champion like that. And if they get them, if they win the Marvel Casino of Champions, as I like to call it, if RN Jesus instead of RN Judas, doesn't betray you, you might make that person love the game more for the rest of the time they play it, just because the champion you designed. And that's why it's such an honor to talk to you, because you dream these things up, you put them in the game, and then you touch thousands, hundreds of thousands of people over the course of their game. So that's amazing. Like, you have such a great legacy, and Apocalypse is just one example. And so, based off of that, several people asked the same question, so I want to make sure I ask it. Can you walk us through what it's like, and I realize it might be a complicated question, to design a champion from like starting with the idea to synergies to implementation to testing?
Yes, absolutely. So the process is definitely a bit in depth. I'll try not to spend too much time on it, but I think it's very important that players understand how it works, because I think it'll give better understanding of why champions might end up the way they do. So the first thing to understand is that not every time we run through this process, we have the same amount of capacity. So designers go out, they're sick, maybe a designer's on vacation, any number of things can happen that limits the capacity we have. But in a perfect world, we'll start off the process by assigning characters. So we get these many months in advance. We have our leads basically sit down with producers and talk with Marvel about upcoming movies, what's going to be releasing in the MCU, what's a character that players want, what do we want for the MCOC lore, that kind of stuff. And we come up with the characters for the next couple of years. So like at this point, we've had characters talked about all the way to the end of 2022. Obviously, they're not locked in yet, but we start talking about them. Once we have characters more locked in, we'll assign designers to the builds. So we do 2 characters, generally 2 characters per build. And every designer will have kind of an on build and an off build. So when you have an on build, it's you and another designer, and you guys just figure out who's taking what character. I like to do this just the old-fashioned way with something like rock, paper, scissors, or just Dave and Buster's, like the big game that we have MCOC on, just battle it out on the machine, or just anything you want. Just a good old office wrestle, whatever, it doesn't matter. But we figure out who's taking what character. And then once you know what character you're going to have, you kind of sit on it, because you're going to be working on other characters. The ones that you just got assigned are so far in the future that you don't actually think about them for quite a while. But you just have the idea in the back of your head that I am going to be working on this character. So you kind of you have a shower thought here and there. You might write something down just in the back of your mind. You're planning. At any given time, a champion designer will be balancing 3 to 4 characters. So there's a lot on our plates. So once you figure out kind of a general idea of what you want to do with the character, maybe some of their abilities. You'll enter the research phase where you look up what they're known for. So there's lots of resources for this. Wikipedia, Comic Vine, whatever you want to use. You're essentially doing a lot of research on what the character's known for in comics, in MCOC, movies, that kind of thing. A lot of the time they're actually different in movies and comics. And you figure out what their identity should be in contest. So you're thinking mostly about abilities at this point. Like if it's Apocalypse, what is he known for? He's known for like bringing mutants up, like making them better. He's known for being like a big ruler guy, very general things. And then we'll put together what we call a creative doc. And the creative doc will hold all that information of like what their abilities are, who the character is, because sometimes the character is not well known. And then we'll walk into our first ever meeting on the character. So this will be a couple months later. You'll have about 1 or 2 months just to think about what the character might do in the back of your mind as you're developing the other 3 characters on your plate. And then when it comes time for the first brainstorm, you'll enter that brainstorm with the creative doc, and you'll sit down with artists and animators. You'll talk about what do we want to do with this guy, mostly visually. So at this point, we're not going to know, Nick Fury is going to have bleeds. We're not going to know Apocalypse is going to have persistent charge. We're only going to know very high level things. So just to use Apocalypse as an example, when I walked into that meeting, all I knew is that Apocalypse is cool. I want him to get bigger. That's pretty much the only thing I knew. And I wanted him to feel very scary. So those are the big things I brought into that meeting. I was like, hey, animators, I want Apocalypse to be scary. How can we do that? And we kind of sit in this meeting, and the animators are like, what if his animations are really long and they're tough to dodge because he's just going to keep blasting you and blasting you? It's like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. And then we come up with these ideas in that meeting of what the gameplay might look like. Now, sometimes in those meetings, we'll have more time, such as Hercules, where me and Cam sat down. We actually talked about exactly how we wanted each animation to play out, the distance of the animations, the specific abilities tied to each. That's rare. Most of the time, we just have a very general idea. So after that first meeting, that's the first brainstorm, we'll do a couple follow-up meetings with just animation reviews. So I'll start working on the paper design. Paper design means like, what are the abilities? How do I want him to play? How do I want him to change the game? Like, is he going to have a bleed? Is he going to have a poison? What does the game need? What does the character do in his lore? And as I'm building this design doc, the animators are actually making the animations. So we're kind of doing them at the same time. And then we'll have our syncs where they're called animation reviews, where we both show what we've been doing. So I'll say, oh, cool, the design, he's got a bleed, so I want him to have a claw attack somewhere. So maybe we'll adjust one of the animations to add claws or that kind of a thing. And we'll do our checkups the whole way through. And then once we're happy with the design, we'll do what we're call, once we're happy with the design, we'll do what we call a design review, where we'll take our design, our paper design, it's all theory at this point, and we'll prototype it. So we'll actually build it in the engine, start to see how things feel when they connect to the moves. And then we'll also present it to the other designers. So every other champion designer has an opportunity to give their feedback on the character's design. So, oh, this ability looks too strong. I get that a lot because I have a bit of a history of making things very powerful. But like, this looks too strong, or this looks too weak. How is this going to happen? Like, we ask a lot of questions. We try a lot of things. We try to kind of solidify the identity of the character. A lot of the times the character will start as 2 or 3 characters. Like, there's so much these guys are doing when we first brainstorm them. Like, oh, let's trim this back. This one character should probably not do this amount of things. So we'll trim back the abilities, focus the abilities on what the core character wants to be doing. And then once every designer is kind of happy, we sign off on it as a champion design team. So when a champion does flop, it's not like one person made a mistake and, oh no. It's more like the champion design team either didn't have time or something went wrong and things didn't come together the way we wanted them to. So I don't think it's a good idea to point fingers like a lot of players tend to do. It's just, it didn't work out. It doesn't always work out, right? It's hard to know until things are released. So once all the designers sign off on it, we do a team review. So people from all the different departments come in. We all talk about the implications of the kit that we've built, the kit we just talked about and brainstormed. Now everyone gets their say. And once everyone gets their say, we'll wrap it up and we'll start our playtesting phase. So playtesting is the designer builds the character's kit, and then we take it onto a device and we just play it. How does it feel? How do the abilities impact the game? What's the damage like? All these types of things. And we're not the best players of our game. We are good players. There's a lot of pretty decent players, but we're not the best. So sometimes it's hard to know, oh, cool, we built a Quake. just how strong is this Quake? Or we built Ghost, just how strong is Ghost? Like, we think she's good, but then when it goes in the wild and we get these insane players that we have out in the community, they're going to master that character and they're going to try to exploit things. So that's why we get some of these oversights, is because we're a limited team with a limited amount of time. And then once it goes live, there's an infinite amount of time and an infinite amount of resources, right? So we're trying to get better at staying on top of that, but that is a problem we're always going to have just because of how small our team is versus how big the audience is. And from there, we play test it, refine it, and then release. That's it.
Sorry to interrupt, but I know people want to know this. So you just named Quake and Ghost. Does the team regret how OP they ended up being, and because they do so many things that you probably didn't think they would do when you designed them?
I would say yes, in a way, because the problems they bring are problems where if you want to shut down their kits and what they're doing, you have to shut down a large part of the roster or make a very big ability change. And what I mean by this is, if you want to shut down Quake, you kind of have to turn off Evade. And if you turn off Evade, suddenly you've turned off all the evades. Suddenly Wasp doesn't work when you're getting hit. Suddenly Elsa can't do her evade. Suddenly any other evade-reliant character can't play anymore. And that is a big problem that we're always having to deal with. Obviously, we don't want Quake to just go and cheese everything, but we also want other toys to be usable, right? You should be able to use your other characters. And the same thing applies to Ghost, where if you really want to counter Ghost, you have to do kind of an armor break or something like that. And that takes up a lot of power budget in the character's kit. If a character has an armor break and just triggers on defense all the time, now that's an ability they permanently have, and that's going to be a consideration on attack, consideration on defense. It's now just part of their kit. And we can't just slap those on everywhere, right? It's really tough. So there are absolutely regrets with those characters who are more powerful than we intended.
Well, I know I speak for the player base when I say thank you for not nerfing them to the ground, though I know there have been some complaints because of the true focus pattern of bosses recently that shut down Quake. I also had to ask this question because you just mentioned that you have a history at Kabam of producing what we like to call OP champions, beyond God tier, as the great Seaton would say. So John Aid 187 wants to know, do you specifically design OP characters, or are your characters just naturally outshining everyone else's?
Believe it or not, I do not specifically try to design OP characters. And what I do as a designer is I try to give every single character I develop a heart. What are they known for? And I want to make them valuable. As a designer, I need to drive value to what for all intents and purposes are my children, right? I spend all this time fostering them, crafting them, raising them. And when I put them out in the wild, I want them to be successful.
Breaking news also, that means Groot doesn't have a heart.
Groot does not have a heart, or if he does, it's made out of wood, sadly. But yeah, that's exactly how it goes for me. So I always want my characters to be valuable. And by doing that, sometimes I have to push boundaries or try new things. And every time you do that, there's always a risk that something's overtuned or something's a little bit too crazy. And that's just the way I've always designed. And that's the way I always will design. I try not to make them overpowered, but they do end up that way when you try to make them really valuable.
So follow-up question to that someone else asked. Have you ever designed a character, got really excited, and the Kabam was like, sorry, we got to nerf them. They're way too powerful?
I'm going to say every character. So wow. Pretty much every character I've designed, and I'll give you two examples, which obviously are Ebony Flaw and Mr. Mangog Eggnog. Those two characters are the ones that got nerfed the most, but I would say almost every single character I've built has been nerfed. I always like to start very wide. I'll build an insanely powerful character that I know for a fact is going to have value, and then I'll trim it back to the essentials. Nick Fury, he's a crazy good character. He started as almost double the size he was now, like in terms of his kit abilities and what he could accomplish. So that actually got trimmed back in half. Same thing with almost all my characters. There was a time where Dr. Doom was even more broken than he is now. And almost every single one of my characters through the iteration and playtesting process got nerfed. Now, for Ebony Maw, I think he's a good example of how difficult it can be to find a good balance. His abilities were so strong and so potent in reviews and playtesting that I was forced to nerf that character. He was not allowed to ship in the way he was. He had too much unavoidable degen on defense. His damage was way too high, and it all comes from a direct source, so nothing could counter it. And his power control was the best in the game. So we had to nerf that character, and by doing that, it kind of led to a worse character. Now, the other problem is Ebony Maw had such a strong ability where he would steal your abilities and give them to himself, and then reduce your abilities by the amount he stole. He used to have that ability in his kit, and it was so strong that he would zero everyone out on the opponent's side. So we had to nerf his kit at 5 p.m. on a Friday, the day before he locked. So I was just sitting there working late, like, what can I do with Ebony Maw? It was all panic mode. And a bunch of his kit kind of came together, and he had a cool loop there, but we didn't have the opportunity to fully test it and fully make sure it was really awesome, like I like to do for my other characters. So because he started so powerful, we actually ended up nerfing him into the ground because we didn't have the time to iterate on him and give him the love that he deserved. And I think that comes from designing a character that's overly complicated and does too many things. Ebony Maw was my second character, and I learned a lot from that guy. However, I did make the same exact mistake again a couple of years later on Mangog. And I think it's just a note for any designer that we have to make sure our complexity doesn't go too overboard, or the character suffers. Then also players won't understand them either.
So, to sum this up, this is so amazing and ironic. If you're joining us, because I'm going to put this as a premiere straight, and we're already at 26 minutes, and he's going to give us an hour of his time because he's amazing. But when I posted the video in honor of you that I sent you, and I'm honored you watched it, the two comments that people kept saying was, I mean, this guy's amazing, but he did design Ebony, Coleslaw, and Mangog. And here we are, breaking news, saying before Kabam touched him, he actually designed what would have been two of the biggest damage outputs in the game. And you basically described before before Ebony Coleslaw had been nerfed, that Ebony Coleslaw would have been the greatest champion in the game.
Yep. He was nerfed as a direct result of the live ops team, who's kind of in charge of the monetization and making sure the game flows and the balance is in place. They complained that he was going to be too strong, so we had to nerf him. But also, I don't want to make that seem like a bad thing against that team. It was very important that we nerfed him because it was actually unhealthy for the game. And this doesn't just affect Ebony Maw. This affects most characters you guys will see in the game that are underwhelming. They started at a very high level, a lot of them, and we had to bring them down because there were too many concerns. And the way we like to look at it is we can always buff a character, but just with the ecosystem of MCOC how it is right now, it's really tough to nerf a character because people paid for that. They spent their hard-earned money into that toy. They invested in many months. Maybe they grinded arena for many hours, many days. It's not fair for us to just go and take away that toy. So if a character does end up underwhelming, we can always bring them up later, especially with our buff balance process now. But we can't really nerf them a whole lot. So we want to be careful with that.
Wow. You just confirmed what I've said on my channel for months, which is that a lot of the times champions will be somewhere in the middle, it feels like, when they're released. And I feel like that's because it is easier to buff someone later than it is to nerf them. And it does feel like, especially when you're spending, some people spend tens of thousands of dollars chasing a champion, right? If you
for sure.
If you buy a Ferrari and then you turn it into a used Taurus, suddenly, especially with the refund system, you feel like you've been essentially stolen from.
Oh, absolutely. No, I totally get the mindset. It's a very tough monetization model that we have to be very careful with.
So I basically want to have this interview be two parts, and we're already about halfway through, and so we have to somehow transition to the next part, which is a huge part of the questions being asked to you. But the last question that I want to ask about champions, and maybe we'll address this at the end again, but is there a champion that just from the Marvel community that if you had stayed at Kabam, you would have loved to design just from personal preference? And then the second part of the question is, how much does the comic book lore of the champion factor into how you design a champion?
So in terms of who I'd like to design, I can proudly say I've checked the boxes on the two most hyped characters I've ever had that I wanted to work on, which is Dr. Doom and Apocalypse. Two of my favorite characters. I love working on them. If there were to be another character coming down the pipe, I don't think I would actually care who it was. Every time I look at a character, I get super excited for what they offer. Every Marvel character has so much cool stuff going on that I actually don't care who I build. I've built my fan favorites already. I've checked those boxes. Now I just want to make other players' dreams come true, so to speak. Like, I know there's fans of almost every Marvel character. When I see someone's character, I'm like, that's someone else's favorite character. I don't know who they are, but they're going to want this guy to be crazy. How do we make this guy crazy? And that gets me excited for literally every character I work on. And I kind of hype myself up like, this is so cool. This is so awesome. And I become the biggest fan of that character just because of how excited I am to release it. And then the second part of that question, can you remind me what it was?
Yeah, so how much does the comic book lore factor in it? Some of the jokes of the community, sometimes it's weird. As much as I love Nick Fury, like in the Captain Marvel movie, he was viewed as little to no threat in the movie. And so when you have Nick Fury way more excited than Thanos, it just feels weird. Like the joke is if they're OP in the comics, they're going to suck in the game. And if they suck in the comics, they'll be OP in the game.
Yeah, so that comes down to the nature of what the game needs and the designer who's in charge of the champion. It's not like we try to make these characters super powerful just because they suck in the movies, or we try to make them suck because they're so insane in the movies. That's definitely not a factor at all. Believe it or not, every character we strive to make insanely powerful, as strong as we can. Now, because of some characters' abilities, we have more leeway. Like what I mean by that is Apocalypse does so many things that a designer who starts to work on Apocalypse has so many avenues they can take. Like there's so many ways I could build Apocalypse. If another designer had built Apocalypse, he would probably not be at all like the one I built, but he'd probably be insanely powerful still in just a different way. And characters that offer more lore and more depth give designers more options and more cool ways of using those abilities to make a better design. That's my personal philosophy on that. But also every designer does it differently, right? Some people design with the meta in mind first, like what do players need? Some people design like what is the lore of this character first? Everyone does it a little bit differently. For me, I always start with what is the character known for? And when I was building Nick Fury, one of the goals I had was for him to be badass. That was it. Like that was the goal. I was like, Nick Fury in movies, he's not that good, but he's a badass. Like, how do I make him a badass? And I want him to like bring the rest of his team up. So his base kit was unintentionally really powerful because I was trying to make him just feel awesome. And I think the same could be said for almost every Marvel character. We try to make them all feel cool. Sometimes the tuning just goes in their favor, other times not so much. But they're always rooted in their comic lore of, in some way, like either they're really cool or they're really powerful or whatever, but we always try to make those abilities feel strong to correlate with their comic reference. When I was building characters like Dr. Doom, for example, I'm a very lore-focused designer. The first thing I'll do is I'll look into exactly what this guy does. I don't care about what the abilities are. I care about what he does. And for Doom, he's a very aggressive, offensive, I'm in control of everything. And my goal for him was, how do I make Dr. Doom feel like I'm in control of everything? So I'm in control of your power. I'm in control of this fight. I'm not going to get knocked down. I'm always standing up. I'm always coming at you. That was the feeling I wanted to go for. And I started experimenting with things to get that feeling. I like to start with the feel first. And not everyone does this, but I always start with the lore and see how should that lore translate into feel in our game.
That's amazing. I mean, I'm learning so much, and so many questions I've wanted to know for years you've answered. So the last question we're going to answer before we go to the second part of the interview, which is going to be very much different than this, is, are there any clues you can legally give us about the teased champion you designed that still has a big question mark over it?
If you guys saw all the stuff, there's a lot of conversation on Twitter. If you guys are curious, there's a lot of tips there. Just scrolling through Twitter, I'm not going to say anything else because somebody already guessed the right answer.
Somebody guessed the right answer. So he didn't say it, but it's on Twitter somewhere. It's on Twitter somewhere, and it might be convoluted. It might be kind of a skewed reference, but it's on Twitter. Somebody guessed it, and I'm not going to confirm or deny it, and I'm not going to give any more hints. I'm not going to say anything else. If anyone DMs me, I'm not going to respond to you. I love you guys, and I want to, but I'm not going to because it's enough. It's out there. But you're excited. So
I'm not going to say anything.
Did you leave Kabam with a mic drop? Is this a champion you're really excited to get in the game?
Oh, so yes. I left Kabam with sadness. I'm not going to lie.
Okay.
Some part of me regrets it, but I also left really happy and excited to see what the heck you guys are going to do with this next thing.
So, speaking of that, so the first half of this interview, we're at 33 minutes, has been all about champions, and we could ask questions all day, and I could just sit here with popcorn, shutting up and listening to him talk about the amazing champions I love to use in the game that he designed from scratch. But you have such a passion. I love hearing your voice talk about how much you loved your job. Why the heck would you leave Kabam if you loved it so much?
So, yes, I want to first address what I've seen a lot. Kabam is not a bad place to work. Kabam is an amazing place to work because of the people. The people of Kabam are some of the best I've worked with in the games industry, and I love them. I would go back there any day. Kabam is amazing. So just wanted to clear that up for anyone who thought like, oh no, Kabam's this, Kabam that. There's a lot of speculation. The reason I left is I'm an indie at heart, and I always like to be challenging myself in a new way. And I got an amazing opportunity I was not looking for, but kind of came upon me, to move to Ireland, because right now I live in Canada, to move to Ireland and work abroad on a new game just for a couple of years. And I decided, you know what? It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. I love my job at Kabam, but I think it could be time to challenge myself in a new way and to go live abroad and just try something different, a whole new culture, meet new people, make new experiences. So that's my plan for the next couple of years, is just go try something completely different, completely crazy, and then come back to Canada at some point and see what happens next.
You heard the broccoli is going to become the meat in Ireland. That's the breaking news. So the next question, which like 5 people asked, let's just assume that 2 years goes well, but then it comes to an end. Would you consider, especially if they give this man a raise, he's the GOAT, and the game still works-ish, would you consider coming back to Kabam someday?
Absolutely, I would. Like I was saying before, I'm an indie at heart. One day I want to run my own studio. I plan to do that. I actually started as an indie when I first started in game development, and I really want to make a couple of my own games first, but someday I would absolutely come back to Kabam. If the people were still there that I know and I love, and that culture was intact, Kabam will always be on the top of my list.
All right. In the spirit of that, Mighty Mark MCOC wanted to ask, what were the working conditions like for Kabam? And now that you're completely free to answer, again, he said he would answer every question. No, obviously, if they were just positive, you can say positive, but maybe what were some challenges as well about working for that kind of company? I mean, it had to be some growing pains and a learning curve at least, right?
Absolutely. There's pros and cons for sure, I think, at every company. For Kabam, I want to say the strong point was the culture. And when I say culture, like, that's a pretty generic thing. What do I mean by that? Every day I would show up in the office. I had a scooter. I would hop on my scooter. I'd buzz around. I'd go to my friends' desks. I'd chat about champion design. Be like, what if we did this and this and this? And I'd throw paper balls at my teammates. We all sat in a little cube together. We'd troll each other. I put some, on my buddy's birthday, I put like a sticky note under his mouse so he couldn't actually use his computer for a while. He's like, what the heck's going on? There's a lot of office shenanigans. And we had this amazing snack wall where you had infinite free snacks, and just the culture's very tight-knit family. The team I worked at in Kabam was my family. I love my real family. I'm from a big family. But my coworkers at Kabam were not just coworkers, they were friends. And that inspired me to make way better content and just get their opinions, get their thoughts, inside work, outside work. And that family culture was one of the best things I've experienced in the games industry. That said, there's downsides too, which I don't want to kind of skim over. I promise I have not been paid by Kabam. And the downsides are there's a lot to juggle. As a champion designer, you're not just a champion designer. You're in the middle of everything. And what do I mean by that? So for creating a new feature for the game, such as you guys saw the root stuff we were doing, where there's a new ability called root, anything like that, any feature that's going into the game, champion designers will put together the documentation. They'll take it the whole way through. They will run that. Champion designers are responsible for building every quest buff. So we don't brainstorm how the buffs work, but we're the technical experts who do all the scripting in the game. So we build every piece of content. So all the quest nodes, we build those. So we'll just work with quest designers to build that. We interact with almost every single department in the studio. We'll talk with economy. We'll talk about boss fights. We'll build all of those. We'll build all the champions. We're building everything. That's a lot of work, and it can be a little bit grindy at times. The games industry is very much, there's a lot happening and there's not much happening. So there's really, really high highs and really, really low lows. So it takes a certain type of person to kind of try to find a balance in there, and it can be tough, especially now that we're all working from home. It's very easy for me to be like, oh, that's a cool idea for Kitty Pryde. I'm going to do that right now, and it's 1 a.m. And disconnecting from work and office is very challenging now more than ever. But I'd say a lot of our work, a lot of our stress, our pain points and our stress that comes from work was self-inflicted because we're so passionate. We're so passionate about the game and making cool stuff that we can't help ourselves. That's the biggest downside, I would say.
Wow, what a first world problem, though, when you love your job so much.
I know, right?
There isn't enough time in the day, right? So I will say this, because this is a huge question, and it's not an easy question to ask, but he's been nice enough for there to be no questions off limits. As you know, the community's really struggled the last couple of months because there are certain aspects of the game that remain broken, parry and dexterity being at the top of the list. Does it concern you that they seem like they've thrown the kitchen sink at it and still can't find a fix, or are you confident that the game will eventually return to, as they like to say, working as intended?
I am very confident in our team. We always have hurdles to overcome. This is another one of those. I happen to know that this issue is not like a Kabam problem. It is because of the engine we're working in and just some of the hiccups. So we're actually working to make our own system. Under the hood, I don't want to get too technical, but under the hood, we're making our own system that can run all of our inputs and all of our specific metrics for our game, so that whenever our engine updates, because it's not actually our engine, it's a third-party source, whenever that updates, it shouldn't affect the gameplay. So our solution, it is taking time, but when that solution comes, it should be a permanent one, is kind of where I last heard on it. So hopefully it's just this pain period to get through, and then the future's bright after that. And we can kind of focus on making cool stuff again.
So does that mean Kabam will have its own servers that don't seem like they're run on hamster wheels, and that will probably eliminate a lot of the emergency maintenance that pops up too?
I can't promise anything, but we're definitely moving in a direction of modernizing and making things as streamlined as possible. We want the game to be up as much as you guys do. It's obviously impacted you guys a lot more than it does us, because you guys do that every day. You guys are paying for that. It's a service. We should be holding it up. But it does impact us too, and we're trying to stay on top of it as much as possible. I happen to know that. Obviously, I'm not in the engineering department, but I can say that from everything I know and the people I know in those departments, they are doing their best to get on top of this and get a permanent solution rather than a duct tape one.
All right. It sounded a little political, but at the same time, it sounded genuine. Just got to say that.
That's totally fair. Also, part of that is I don't fully understand that stuff, right? Like, we're in the design world, we're not super open to that. We can only hear parts of that. So I can only speak to it from what I see.
Another popular comment, Super Cool Panda asked this question, and if you're just now joining us, I encourage you to go back to some of this interview because I've learned so much and you'll learn so much. He designed the most OP champion, not Apocalypse, not Dr. Doom. It was originally going to be Ebony Coleslaw, who I guess would have been like Ebony Steak had they not nerfed him. But Super Cool Panda says, does Kabam have a plan for how many God-tier champs can come out in a year, or is it actually just how good the champion design is? Because if so, he's quitting MCOC because Kabam Broccoli made the only best champs in his mind that were made, which is not true, but at the same time, that's just how he feels because that's how much he loves the champions you designed.
Personally, love the support, love the passion. The players in MCOC are some of the most passionate vocal players. Sometimes I don't like you guys for it. Most of the time I love you for it. And the times I don't like you for it, 10 minutes later when I've kind of gotten over it, I'll actually appreciate your feedback. So on that note, we aim for every champion to be God tier. Every single champion in the game, we want to be good. Now, it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes they're overtuned, sometimes they're undertuned, but it's not a goal of, oh, this guy's going to suck, this guy's going to be great. We want every champion to be great. Now, that said, it's good to have some highs and some lows. So some champions are going to be, this guy's generically good. Like Elsa Bloodstone, she's going to be pretty well balanced. She's a good character. She's going to do a bunch of cool stuff. Other guys, like Apocalypse or big names that we really want to give some oomph to, like Hercules as well, because he was community voted, we give them a little bit of extra love, a little extra push, because you know what? Those guys really need to just land and be like insane because they're players' toys. I always think of it as the players own this guy. Like Hercules, he's not my champion to design. He's your guys' champion. Apocalypse or Dr. Doom, these are big, huge names you guys have been asking for years. We have to do them justice. So those times, we like to add a little extra spice. But every time we design a champion, we always want them to be good. There's never like an intentional flop.
And that makes sense. And I say that a lot of times on my channel because if you intentionally made a champion that was terrible, then people wouldn't spend money to go after that champion, and the economy of your profits would suffer. So
exactly,
it makes no sense to put all that work in just to know that champion's going to suck.
And the other thing I think is important on that is that I think of my champions as my children, and I think a lot of us designers do. So when a champion falls flat, it's not like, Kabam gets 1 and the players get 0. No, we both get 0. Because that designer, they had that champion attached to their name and they want it to be better. They tried to make it better and something didn't happen. Something didn't go the way they planned. Every designer who has a champion who's not great, I guarantee you they want to go back and just tweak some numbers right now. Please let me do it. But we don't have the time or capacity to go and do that effectively. So that's why our rebalance process is in full swing, to bring those guys back up to par with what they should have been.
And that analogy is so personal because if they're your children and you look at Ebony Maw, that's like your child being valedictorian of the best Ivy League school ever and working as a Fortune 500 CEO to like being homeless and living under a bridge with the rest of the trolls. So that's quite...
Ebony Maw dropped out and he's now working at McDonald's. So it's unfortunate, but that's where he's at and I love him anyway.
You know what? Mickey D's is a good way. That means that he's going to get a buff and maybe a college scholarship. Who knows?
I hope so, yeah.
So there's a lot of versions of this question. And I love, like, I am pleasantly surprised how much you just know about the game and love the game. Like, that's so encouraging to hear. Even though you've left Kabam for now, keywords for now, because he's already said on this interview that he could come back, what are some roadmap changes that you'd make or add for the game's future to best secure it and make it better for the players? And this is asked by a lot of people, including Kittens Making Candles, which sounds like a really weird PBS show.
I think that's a really, really tough question. I don't think I'll be able to give you guys a good answer for that. That's not a problem I think one person can solve. I think it's about finding out what's next. So we have our champions, we have our toys. Players love those. We can keep giving them those, but that's only going to sustain for so long. What can the contest offer players as a next step? What's the next big thing? And I personally think that MCOC needs more ways to play with your toys that don't take away or invalidate the pre-existing ways. If someone wants to play Alliance War and they want to play Alliance Quest, they can do that. How do we give players a new way to play, if they so choose, that uses their toys in a new way? And I think that's an important thing for us to figure out. And I know the team has a lot of cool ideas as to what they're going to do with that. But in general, I think it's really hard to know exactly what's going to work and what's not. It's just about trying new things and seeing what we can push for and see what the player's reception is and what sticks, what doesn't, and rolling with that. Because I think the players know the product better than us. We're trying to give you guys a service, but we also want your guys' feedback on what we should be doing with this. And if you don't like something, I think we need to learn to just cut those and figure out what things you guys do like and push for those. Because the happier you guys are, the happier we are. And it's a relationship that we need to balance between player and Kabam.
Okay, I appreciate that feedback. There's a lot of people who message me every day because, of course, the Marvel Casino of Champions is like pulling the handle of a slot machine. That's part of the excitement of opening crystals, but if you hit bankruptcies for too long, it feels like you're cursed and you're never going to land. Like, I've been hunting Red Guardian for literally a calendar year. There are children, plenty of children in the world that have been born before this hunt has been over. And so there are a lot of people who are burnt out because their 6-star rosters are terrible because there's a lot of champions like Juggernaut, for example. It feels like a rite of passage to get a 6-star Juggernaut that they can't use or they feel like aren't the best. So is there anything, and you don't have to say the specifics because I understand the secrecy, but is there anything that you know of that's coming into the game in the next 6 months that we could tell people watching this? Like, I know your crystal luck hasn't been great, but we've got some great things planned, so stick with us, and it's going to be an even better experience.
There's nothing I can say on that. The design team isn't directly in contact with kind of the crystal model team.
Okay.
We do some chats on just like quick syncs of like what characters we're going to be releasing and how they might appear in crystals, but I can't actually speak to that with full confidence. What I would like to say is I would really like to start seeing more nexuses, more choices, because you're right, it is a casino, and the introduction of Nexus, I think, was a really great feature and something personally I think we could do a lot more with, and I've definitely heard talks about potentially doing things, but again, I'm not on those teams, so I don't want to kind of give anyone false information.
Thank you for that. The next question, the community would not forgive me if I didn't ask it. It's a difficult question, and it might be an awkward question, but the face of Kabam on the forums is Kabam Mike. He's somebody that sometimes can be very passive-aggressive and emotional, and he's ticked a lot of people off to the point that a lot of these questions involve him. Have you met him in real life? Have you worked with him? What's he like as a human being? And if you haven't met him, then it's going to be a really easy question, but if you have, a lot of people want to
know. So the first thing is, there's a lot of drama when you read what someone wrote and you don't understand what they meant. I have met Kabam Mike, and I do like Kabam Mike. I think he's a great guy. If you met him in person, you would think he's a great guy. I don't want to speak to any of the interpretations of the things he says. I don't think that's my place. But I will say that every experience I've had working with him has been great. And sometimes when you read someone's message online and you see only the text version, it's hard to get their tone and how they actually mean it, because he's a very friendly person. So that's a tough question, I would say.
So when he says something on the forums that comes across as like alienating the community, you see that as him almost being horrified that his words created that division because that wasn't his intention.
I don't think he ever tries to divide anyone. He is passionate just like the rest of us to make cool stuff. And sometimes that might not come across, or players might misunderstand, or he might accidentally write something he doesn't mean. I think that's just the nature of working in games for so long and interfacing with the community so often. But I don't think any of it is him getting really mad at anyone or anything like that. I think it's just genuine misunderstandings. From everything I know about Kabam Mike, he's a great guy.
Okay. Well, I promised you all I'd ask that question. He's given it his truth. I can attest to the fact that, and this is just human condition more than just this game. Like when you put a face to a forum post name, you always feel like you can trust them more, and so that's really, really important. Were you surprised that Doom and Immortal Abomination, this was a specific question, got to be as awesome and powerful, and I guess Apocalypse can be thrown in, as they were allowed to be? Or were you worried that they were going to have to be nerfed more than they were?
So the thing with Doom is that he actually was nerfed quite a lot. I actually have some
crazy to think about. Oh.
Yeah. So he's a nerf Dr. Doom. The Doom you're seeing is the nerfed one. It's the one that everyone was like, you know what? We'll give it to you, Broccoli. You can ship this. Sure. We nerfed him enough. That was his nerf state. I remember sitting in playtest, and the great thing about when the office used to be open is that it was very personal. We'd all sit on these couches and these sofas in like little huddle, and we'd all be playing. And I remember playing with somebody, and he's like, dude, I just threw 13 special ones back to back, and the opponent can do nothing. I was like, well, special one doesn't deal that much damage, right? He's like, I don't know if that's a very good philosophy. Maybe we shouldn't have him throwing 13 special ones. So that got nerfed. But there was a point in time where Dr. Doom was probably 2-3 times more powerful than he is now, and that's his nerf state. In terms of my fear of him getting nerfed into the ground, I didn't feel that with Dr. Doom. His abilities were so strong that I was very confident he was going to land. And I was actually very discouraged when some of the first things I saw were comparison videos of, oh, Dr. Doom sucks, look at him compared to Diablo. And people were making these videos, and I was like, wait, hold on. He's actually not that bad. Give him some time. And then after some time and players figured out how to actually use the character, he was way better than I was hoping for. And I was like, okay, well, maybe it's a little bit too much. But you never really know. And every single time I've released a character, I always had that stress of, is he going to land? Is he not? I don't know. And it's a question mark, right? Like we always give it our best, but we never know if it's going to stick.
Is that the same for Immortal Abomination too?
Immortal Abomination, I would say less so. Dr. Doom was actually a pretty early character for me. I think I made him in my first year at Kabam, so I wasn't fully confident in the game and the interactions. But when I was building Immortal Abomination, I was much more seasoned and I understood the processes a lot more. So I was very confident in his design, and I was very happy with where he landed. I knew he would have good value because there's not a lot of poison in the game. I knew I was giving him a cool new ability that no one else had. I think I called it Toxic Burn or something. And I knew that was going to give him a lot of value, make him really cool. He got a weakness on block, which is a really cool, unique mechanic. And if a character's doing enough cool, unique things and you know their damage is high, it's hard for those characters to fail. But we can't do that in every case. Not every character can be the next Poison God. Not every character can be these things. But when we do get those formulas and we know that that's the character and what his identity is going to be, we're usually very confident. So Immortal Abomination, I had no concerns at all. I also got to work with him on Brian Grant. So I had Brian Grant's feedback the whole way through. And that gave me just an extra level of confidence as well.
Well, BG is definitely somebody that you can always trust to give you feedback on champions. He's an incredible resource for the community. What about... because a lot of people asked about this. What about Black Widow Clairvoyant? What was the thought process with her? Were you worried she would get nerfed more than she was?
Not at all, actually. Not at all. Clairvoyant Black Widow was one of my most fun design experiences. And the reason I say that is a lot of characters have the constraints of what they're known for in the lore and this and that. And he's Dr. Doom, so he's got to do this. And he's Apocalypse, so he's got to do that. Clairvoyant was the big question mark. And we have a lot of kind of talks with Marvel back and forth as to, can the character do this or should they do that or how should this look and that kind of a thing. Clairvoyant was a very creatively open, very creatively free character, and I was kind of told, just go have fun with her, make something cool. And I was like, dude, do not tell me that. I'm the type of designer who's going to be very passionate, be like, okay, cool, let's do something crazy. And I was like, let's make her get benefits when she's immune to things. Let's make her have triple immunities. Let's make her have some modes. And I just put so much time and love into crafting her kit. And I was very proud of how it turned out. And I never even once thought about nerfs or buffs or any of that thing. I just thought she's cool. And I was so passionate about it that I didn't even think about it.
Wow. That's like giving a kid in a toy store like an unlimited budget and just saying, go play.
Exactly. It's exactly what it is. I am a kid who gets to make games. And I love it. I feel like I'm let loose and just go make cool stuff. And that's exactly why I feel like I was born. That's what my goal is. That's why I'm here.
I also, this is a weird tangent, but I feel like, love hearing his voice. This guy's got an energetic personality. I want to be this guy's friend now, regardless of whether or not he comes back to you also sound like Captain Bay, also a good friend of mine. I don't know if you've watched that YouTuber, but it's like,
I have.
It's uncanny. Well, shout out to Captain Bay. So we've got about 5 minutes left. Again, I don't want to take more of your time than you've given us. It's already been incredibly jealous. Are you allowed, because you do have a following, like, I don't know how much the game that hired you away from Kabam realizes, but they recruited the GOAT of MCOC. And so people trust that you can build really fun things to play. And so can you give us an idea of the game you're working on next, or can you at least give me a promise in the future that I can give the community that information so that if they want to download something and follow your work, that they know where to go?
If I decide to make that public, I'm not sure if I will, but I might. And if I decide to make that public, it will show up on my Twitter, and you guys will be the first to know. I'm not sure, because like this whole Twitter thing and being more personal about who I am and what I'm doing is a very new thing for me. I didn't actually realize how big of a following there would be for Kabam Broccoli, so I felt so overwhelmed and excited by that, and I love it. And it's really meaningful to me, but I'm trying to find that balance of how much I'm going to share versus how much I'm not. And once I decide that, it'll absolutely be on Twitter. I just want to make sure I do it right and be careful with it, because on the internet, you never know. I want to kind of protect myself first and my family and those close to me.
And that's why we've essentially hidden your identity in this interview. I know people don't want to stare at me. I wouldn't want to stare at myself. You know, I hunt the dad bod every day in the mirror. But I do want people to follow you. So don't be surprised if you get an uptick of followers after this interview. So as long as you're cool with that Twitter blowing up more, you know, I'm going to put your handle in the comments and the information of this and probably pin it. But I'm just so happy. I'm looking through so many of these questions, and a lot of people asked the same version of questions, and we've covered a lot. Is there a champion that you saw designed by somebody else that you thought, man, it's not that you don't like their design, but you would have loved to design that champion if you had the opportunity?
That's actually a really great question. I'm going to say probably not. And the reason why is that our champion design family is so close and tight-knit that if someone's working on a character and I'm inspired about something, I'm just going to walk up to that guy's desk and be like, hey, this design, I don't like it. And here's why. Like, I think this could be different, this could be different, and I'm going to give you feedback. Now, we aren't attacking each other, but we are firm with each other. So if I think something is terrible, I'm going to tell someone I think that's terrible. And if I'm passionate because I love this character, maybe I'm a huge fan of Spider-Man and I see someone working on a Spider-Man character, I'm going to go up to that person and be like, hey, listen, I'm a huge fan of Spider-Man. Have you considered this? What do you think about that? And because we're so close and tight-knit and we share so many ideas, by the time a character goes out the door, maybe it's a Kabam Broccoli character, or it's Kabam whoever else character, but we've all had a chance to touch it and add whatever flavors to it or ideas to it that we could. So I've never once felt like, oh man, I really hate how that character turned out. Yeah, it could be maybe be different, or I might have done something differently, but it's not my character, and I still had an influence on it, and I have my own family, my own children that I did get to work on directly. So I never once felt cheated or like I should take someone else's character, even a little bit.
So it's good to know, and this is going to be the last question because we're about in an hour, and again, I don't want to hold him up. He's been so generous with his time. But there's this fear that because so many of our favorite champions were designed by you, that now that you've left the company, we're going to have a bunch of mediocre, forgettable champions that you could take off the game and we wouldn't even notice for months. So I'm sure because you're friends with these people, you have confidence that the game is still in good hands, and you've said something to that effect during this interview. But do you also think that now that you've left, you'll still either play or keep up with MCOC, and do you feel like you could reach out to them even on your own, not for money, but just for facts, and give some tips if they came to you wanting to know your thought process on future champions?
Absolutely, I would. Like I said before, it's not just coworkers to me, it's friends. Actually, someone from Kabam texted me about 5 minutes before this interview. We were just chatting because we're friends in real life, just talking about work and life and all that kind of a thing. So absolutely, I would be willing to talk about that. In terms of what I play, when I first started at Kabam, I played the game nonstop. I'm the type of designer who thinks to make quality work and to make things that are valuable to players, I have to understand what players are going through. What are the problems they have? What do they need? Where are they going? What are they feeling? Like, how bad does it feel to pull like a 6-star superior Iron Man or whatever? And trust me, I went through that whole thing for many years. So the first couple of years at Kabam, I played hardcore. All my on time, all my off time, throughout the day, whenever I could, all the time. That said, at a certain point, that work followed me home a little too much. And what I mean by that is I'm in MCOC land every single day, 8 hours a day. I'm at my computer, I'm working on characters, I'm thinking about the game, I'm thinking about the tech part of it, I'm thinking about the character part of it, the meta. And I'm also on my off time hanging out with my girlfriend, playing the game. I'm lying in bed, about to go to bed, I'm playing the game. I'm in the shower, I'm playing the game. Yes, I have a waterproof one and I play in the shower. I'm playing the game so much, and I'm integrated with it so much on the day, I decided, you know what, it's too much. This isn't a good balance, especially with everyone working from home. It was just too much for me. So I decided to put the game down. I felt I had a strong understanding of the game meta, the player needs, and I could continue to build characters for that. And I started to do my research and my player discussion stuff through content creators. And because I had a strong foundation of playing the game for many years, understanding what that was like, I was able to just kind of stay on top of that by just watching your guys' videos. Prof Hoff and KT1 and Seaton and all these content creators, I'm constantly watching. I want to see what you guys are going through so I can make content for that. And that was how I was able to make a lot of really powerful characters, in my opinion, is staying on top of that and staying inspired.
Amazing. This man in an hour has covered what it was like to work for Kabam, why he left Kabam, what it was like to create from scratch somebody like Apocalypse, the comic book lore that goes into it, what champions would have been the most amazing OP, break the game crazy champions had they not been nerfed sometimes to the ground before they were released. Last question. Thank you again so much for your time. There's so many people who are going to watch this and they wish they could just say thank you. If you appreciate him, he's going to keep this video, put it in the comments, some love, because these comments will be here forever for him. But is there anything that you want the community to know or that you want to say directly through my channel to the community before you go?
I would like to say Kabam cares. Sometimes it can feel like it's a corporation versus players and it's all about money. I understand that. It is a product that's trying to make money. We are trying to stay afloat. We are trying to support our families. But almost every single person working at Kabam, and especially the champion design team, are extremely passionate people. And they want this product to succeed, not just to get money, not just to make a dollar, but because they think it's cool. And whenever you type a message or you say something angry about someone, there is a person there. And obviously we want you guys to voice your opinions, but we want you guys to know that we're people too. And we are very invested and very passionate, just like you are. We're gamers. We love this product. We love these characters. We love Marvel. We want to deliver as many awesome things as possible. And I don't want players to forget that, because a lot of the time when you're just focused and you're sitting on your couch, you're playing MCOC, you only see the bugs. You only see the flaws, and there's a person behind that, and they tried their best, and they're gonna make it up to you. They're gonna buff that character. They're gonna fix that bug. We're trying, and I think players need to understand that. That's my final only thing I want to say. Otherwise, I want to say huge shout out to this community. I've had so much fun interacting with the content creators, the YouTubers, the community, seeing all the support on Twitter. I cannot believe the amount of likes my tweet got. I just posted it for myself as like hey, maybe in a couple of years I'll look back on this. And it got like hundreds of likes and retweets and people talking and just talking about how much they love these characters. And you guys inspired me. You guys inspire me every single day, and just leaving Kabam, it breaks my heart. But I want to say you guys are the best community I've ever interacted with on the internet, and I truly am going to remember you forever. I can't forget you guys. You're awesome.
You are the prodigal son. We hope that you return someday, but please stay with the community. Just because you're going to be across the pond now doesn't mean you can't hang out with us. I'd love to do this again sometime. I know your schedule's going to be crazy and it's going to be a completely different time zone. This is the first time I have ever done this on my channel. I usually post videos that are 5 minutes or less. This is over an hour. If you've enjoyed this, if you would like me to do more content like this, please let me know in the comments. But otherwise, just a huge thank you again. His Twitter handle is going to be in the comments. Don't overload him with personal DMs, because I don't want this man to be overwhelmed. He's trying to do that work-life balance before he goes overseas. But, give him his flowers now. He has taken his time to do this, even with somebody who is often critical of Kabam, and I'd like to think with, rightful reasons, but still critical nonetheless. And so thank you for coming on my channel, for doing this interview, and thank you for answering so many questions. This guy is the GOAT, and he always will be to us.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It's been an insanely awesome experience, and I would love to do it again sometime.